at the gay nightclub and shook Orlando and the nation. 49 people died when a man who pledged allegiance to ISIS walked into that nightclub heavily armed and opened fire, slaughtering innocent patrons. A year later, this solemn makeshift memorial outside Pulse is a constant reminder of the lives lost, the threat of homegrown terrorism. Democratic Representative Val Demings joins us now to discuss. She's a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security and actually served as the Orlando police chief before entering Congress. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. I first wanted to ask you about a tweet that you sent out, a picture of a survivor of the nightclub massacre who now happens to be a member of your staff. What was it that prompted you to hire him?
Well, I hired him, and good evening to everyone. I hired him because he's actually an intern with our staff, and he was brought on board because of his interest in politics, the skills that he brings to the job, but certainly our desire to let people know that we're an office that celebrates diversity, and the skills and information that he brings to the table are certainly good for our office as well as, I think, good for our community.
And Congresswoman, despite the fact that tomorrow marks the first anniversary of the deadliest shooting in modern American history in Orlando, a city that millions of people from around the world visit annually, the Department of Homeland Security recently denied funding to the city to prepare for a terrorist attack like the one on Pulse. Why?
You know, it's really hard to believe when you just look at Orlando before the Pulse shooting. We were on the list and then taken off the list a few years ago. When you look at the number of people in the density of communities in Orlando, when you look at the 68 million people roughly who visit our city every year, and now the deadliest mass shooting in the history of our country. I had an opportunity to question Secretary Kelly during a Homeland Security hearing and asked him about the methodology for deciding which cities should be on the list or how cities get on the list, because it's just baffling to me that Orlando, with the number of people that they serve and now with this deadly shooting, would not be on the list. So that is still a work in progress, but we are not going to let it go.
Now, you were appointed to serve on the Homeland Security Committee looking at attacks like in San Bernardino, Orlando. We're fortunate that we really haven't had something on that scale since, but are you satisfied with the efforts you've seen since that shooting to keep something like this from happening again?
Well, I think we have to be vigilant every day. We have to remember that in this world there are people who get up every day and pretty much every waking minute are thinking about how to attack America and how to attack Americans. And so the security of our nation certainly is our #1 concern. But it really starts with local law enforcement. We've seen the unbelievable job that they were able to do under the most horrific circumstances last year this time. But they depend on grant programs, support from the federal government to be able to further do the work that they do. When we look at the shooter in Orlando, we know that he was interviewed twice by federal authorities and had been on a watch list and then came off the watch list. I think that we could do a better job in terms of information sharing between the local, state, and federal agencies. We also need to continue, as opposed to dividing our nation, we need to continue to build relationships with persons from diverse backgrounds and our neighbors who are really critical to providing intelligence that further helps to keep our nation safe as well.
I have to ask you about this. Then candidate Trump tweeted this out last year on the day of the Pulse massacre. He writes, quote, "Appreciate the congrats for being right on radical Islamic terrorism. I don't want congrats. I want toughness and vigilance. We must be smart." The president also sent out tweets just last week about travel ban after the London terror attack. When it comes to mass casualty incidents like the attack in your district, you've been outspoken about having to take political action to make us safer. But where do you draw the line when it comes to the risk of politicizing tragedies while still demanding changes that you think are necessary to keep people safe?
Well, I certainly think that there's no greater time when we need real leadership than when our nation is going through a horrific event like we've seen at the Pulse nightclub. The entire community is grieving, but the nation and the world is really grieving this incident. And I believe the president has not exhibited leadership in the worst of times in this country. As I said earlier, it is not a time to divide. It is a time to work together to bring real solutions to a threat that is with us every day. I would really like to see the president show leadership when it comes to gun safety legislation. We know that one person armed with an assault rifle and a handgun walked into a nightclub and opened fire on innocent people, 49 dead, many more injured, and lives shadowed forever. I'd really like to see the president show some real leadership and get involved, since he seems to like to sign an executive order to really help keep guns out of the hands of people like the Orlando shooter.
That's all the time we have, Congresswoman Val Demings. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday.
Thank you.